Hey everyone. Today I thought I'd make a video about a really important topic to me, and possibly a very, very important topic for pretty much everyone, and that is about healthcare and the medical industry. So recently I've been quite influenced by people like G. Edward Griffin. His book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, A World Without Cancer. He's done loads of research into the medical industry. Also, just a lot of other really, really prominent people, Dr. Ron Paul and Paul Craig Roberts, James Corbett from the Corbett Report, loads of YouTubers, We Are Change, World Alternative Media, Naomi Brockwell, who is always doing amazing work. I just watched a recent video of hers with Josiah Zayner, a global leader in the biohacking movement. And I hadn't even heard of biohacking. But when you dive deep into these things, you realize that people are actually, they're taking their medication, they're taking their health, they're taking their education into their own hands. And it really makes you think about the fundamental ways that society is being developed and how it's been structured. And when you look into the history of things, you can kind of see why things are the way they are today. So before I go any further, I'd just like to say this has nothing to do with doctors and healthcare professionals, who I really do believe do a great job. This is really an observation of the industry from a distance. It's informed by personal experience and by research, and I'm sorry to get heavy about all this, but I'm pretty sure this affects us all. So I think it's really worth talking about. So I'm going to focus on America. It's been such a influential, nation in Western worlds, but also as a global empire. A lot of the corporations, these multinational corporations are an extension of American policy. If we take it back to the beginning of the 20th century, back in the day, anyone could be a doctor. The profession was throughout the country unlicensed, and anyone who had the inclination to set himself up as a physician could do so. The exigencies of the market alone determining who would prove successful in the field and who not. Hence, there was a lot of these snake oil salesmen. In fact, the Oxford English Dictionary defines snake oil as a quack remedy or panacea. It really belittles the idea of medicine in a formal way. Despite continual denunciations in regular medical journals and medical societies that these sects were pure quackery, they continued to be supported by the public, who persisted in channeling fees to heterodox practitioners which, in their absence, might well have ended up in the pockets of regular physicians. The economic condition of the profession being what it was in the 1870s, with no restrictions on entry into the field, a host of competing medical schools eager to graduate doctors in greater numbers, and heterodox medicine contending for the patient's dollar, regular physicians increasingly felt the need to effectively organize. Their goal was to enlist the support of government as a means of regulating the number and qualifications of physicians. So these two schools of thought were becoming severely polarized, fighting for their share of medical work. On the one side, you had the orthodox doctor who organized into the American Medical Association. And on the other side, you had the heterodox practitioners who were the alternative or natural doctors. Despite attempts to delegitimize these natural or alternative doctors, the American Medical Association was having no luck getting rid of them. Basically, the orthodox practitioners were looking to eradicate any competition and take control. Around this time, there were many entrepreneurs who were coming up with their own business models, and a fellow by the name of Pillsbury, he came up with the idea of efficiency in philanthropy. This basically meant to give money away for philanthropic purposes. Now, this idea resonated with some other entrepreneurs, namely the Carnegie and the Rockefellers. Now, these were extremely wealthy families who had made their wealth by monopolizing the industries of oil and steel. At that time, the US government was looking to dismantle the empire of Standard Oil, and so the Rockefeller and Carnegie foundations were established as a way to sidestep government control through philanthropy. Rockefeller and Carnegie used the idea of efficiency through philanthropy to donate money to the medical education system with the insight and deception that the donations could be on the one hand a future tax haven, whilst at the same time be used to gain influence into the emerging medical and pharmaceutical industry, which was already becoming dependent on the oil industry. What also began around the turn of the 20th century was the discovery of petrochemicals, the ability to create all kinds of chemicals from oil. Well, the first plastic, called Bakelite, was made from oil in 1907. Scientists were discovering various vitamins, and they guessed that many pharmaceutical drugs could be made from oil. And this was a serious opportunity for Rockefeller, who saw the ability to monopolize the oil, the chemical, and the medical industries all at the same time. I guess these foundations knew that the medical schools would be interested in receiving these donations as such. So they funded the medical schools with the condition that the medical schools would accept, well, their influence in a way. They were to accept appointments to the board of directors at these institutions. These people would be influential in the decision-making of these educational institutions. The most influential of these additions was a fellow by the name of Abraham Flexner. Mr. Flexner wrote what's known as the Flexner Report, published in 1910. This was commissioned by the Carnegie Foundation. In this report, it established science as the basis for all medicine and clinical education. He had a strong bias against homeopathy, against alternative medicines, against naturopathy. And these colleges were gradually forced to eliminate any programs involving these things. Many doctors had equipment removed from their offices. They were taken to these museums of quackery. They were told that if they wanted to continue using therapies such as electrotherapies, they'd be basically doing it from prison. The courts consistently ruled that the regulation of heterodox systems of treatment fell within the police powers of the state, and that the broadly defined laws governing medical practice, which most states had enacted, encompassed spiritual and drugless leaders of all types, among which were magnetic healers, mental healers, osteopaths, chiropractors, vitopathic healers, practitioners of suggestive therapeutics, neuropaths, naturopaths, and those employing the laying on of hands. Additionally, the courts ruled that it is not a defense that the patients treated by these methods knowingly accepted the mode of treatment offered, nor that the patients might have benefited from the treatment. So there are really four main areas where the Flexner Report really aimed to take control and have dominance. Firstly, it proposed a standardization of the medical professional industry. So a kind of one-size-fits-all in order to establish an accreditation process for medical schools. Number two was an integration of laboratory experience and standard pharmaceutical education. At the time, there was limited science and laboratory experience for doctors, and so Flexner wanted to incorporate a laboratory learning into the curriculum and to connect the advances in the laboratory with clinical practice. Number three, Flexner believed that doctors were too tradition-bound. He wanted medical education to be taught by specifically scientifically orientated curriculum. He wanted to train doctors to become physicians that think like scientists. And number four, he wanted identity formation. Essentially, he wanted to give doctors qualifications and recognition which was immersed in medical education in the university culture. Now, of course, at the time, this was seen as hugely revolutionary. That was 100 years ago. It almost completely focused on the hierarchy and accreditation of the medical professional. It focused on science and chemistry and this thing called EBM, which is evidence-based medicine, and it insisted that the money from these foundations be spent on empirical pharmaceutical education and empirical statistics. But what this report has basically left us with is it's reduced doctors to a standard one-size-fits-all pharmaceutical chemist, completely uneducated in natural, nutritional, or alternative-based medicine, and actually really clueless to advances in other forms of medicine that are not accredited or endorsed by the recognized medical establishment. There's a lot of medical professionals who obviously take a lot of pride in the medical industry. It's very difficult to be a doctor and to be educated in the pharmaceutical industry. And that creates an attitude of dogma and pretense. How could anyone challenge this knowledge? And this is not the fault of doctors, as I said earlier. It's the way they've been trained, straight out of the book. Doctors learn all about chemistry. They learn all about biology. They're fantastic at giving you drugs to address your symptoms. They can fix a broken leg or replace a broken heart. Well, if your heart stops beating, they can replace your heart, right? But the problem we are realizing is that man-made science, as opposed to natural alternatives, they don't offer long-term solutions because they don't really cure the underlying issues. They tend to address the symptom rather than the real problem. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to a doctor and told them about your problem, only to have them prescribe a drug that kind of worked for a bit or sort of got rid of the pain, but not really the problem. I've spoken to many people about this, and they all confirm the same experience. And so there's a number of factors at play here. Firstly, modern medicine is fast. It's effective enough to warrant acceptance, but not so effective as to become a cure. So people become reliant on the medication or the operation or the treatment, which means it's a recurring theme, which means it can become profitable. So it doesn't matter what the problem is, the way a doctor will advise is through medication or operation, because it's a great way to make money. Doctors would never suggest diet or nutrition or alternative natural remedies because, number one, they haven't been educated in it. Number two, they don't have the time for it. But most importantly, number three, they can't make money from it. Personally, I've cured myself time and time again through diet or natural remedies that the doctor told me were either dangerous or that simply just couldn't be done or wouldn't work. Doctors are quite simply not educated in the ways we need them to be. Sure, we've come a long way with medical advances. Chemistry and science have really propelled us into the future in many ways. But the basic education about diet and natural medicine is non-existent. There are other issues at play here too. Firstly, patenting of ideas. You can't patent anything that comes from nature, although, yeah, Monsanto have tried. But basically, if you can't patent something, you can't make money from it. Secondly, the takeover of the FDA. Big Pharma have also bought the Food and Drug Administration, who control the laws about which foods and which drugs are permitted. Thirdly, the general lobbying of politicians to get them to pass laws that allow certain drugs and chemicals to be used. And so what we now have is a system that operates on rules that benefit corporations rather than operating out of the benefit for people. I mean, the goal is not to save lives, but to follow the rules. It's a medical education system that's inflexible, it's overly long and drawn out, which doctors suffer from incredibly, these long hours of work. It's pharmaceutically orientated, it's focused on quick fix medication, it's focused on profit through selling that medication. It's uneducated in natural health procedures, which are from nature, which are inexpensive, which have long-term health benefits, which would actually keep people from returning to doctors and actually save money in the end for the general population anyway. Education for both students and physicians, it's emphasized on the mastery of facts rather than experiences now. You know, doctors have basically lost touch with how to treat people effectively. Big Pharma seeks profit over the health and well-being of the humans it serves. Drug companies have invasively corrupted the way that healthcare industry delivers its vital services. The story of Big Pharma is basically the same story of how big governments, big oil, big agri-chemi giants like Monsanto have come to power. The controlling shareholders of all the major industries are one and the same. Big money belonging to the global central banking cabal own and operate all the Fortune 500 companies, in addition to virtually all national governments on this earth. The Rockefellers privatized healthcare in the States back in the 1930s and has financed and largely influenced both healthcare and Big Pharma ever since. I feel really sad to say that it's a sickness. It's quite literally our Western sickness. Because the bottom line is, if humans are healthy, the healthcare industry does not survive. It's in its inherently self-serving interest to promote illness in the name of wellness. I mean, without people being sick, you don't have a healthcare industry. And that's the profit making monetary basis that we have in our society. And that needs to change. So what's the solution? All I can say is, here's what I've done. In my own experience, the number one thing has been firstly to educate myself about my health issues on a personal level. And the way to educate yourself really is by getting as many opinions as possible. So online, from friends' experiences, get a history of your family, your hereditary history, so a medical history that gives you an idea of what you're susceptible to, what your weaknesses are hereditary wise. There is an abundance of information online now. So it really is up to the individual to get themselves educated, to understand exactly where their problems are. If you can understand what your problem is, you're halfway there. What seems like a problem on the surface, it's gonna definitely have many layers to it. I advocate the power of being your own doctor, because that is invaluable, to be your own doctor, to understand how you can prescribe essentially medication for yourself. Food is medication. I mean, that should be something that people learn as well. That it's not just taking a drug that's medication. Every time you consume something, that is either a poison or a medicine. Now, obviously, a major warning here, you have to do extensive research. It's all about research. And thank God we have free access. It's free at the moment. Free access to all of this education online. From my understanding, diet is everything. You are what you eat. Through my experience, diet makes the biggest impact on your health. I really hope this video has been helpful. I really hope it's been informative. I hope I haven't annoyed any medical professionals, because I believe they're doing a great job. I believe the underlying problems of the medical industry are much deeper than what appears on the surface. And I encourage everyone to do their research, particularly on themselves, because once you do the research into your own problems, you will uncover many issues in the medical industry, as I have. If you like this video, please subscribe, and I hope to see you all again in the next one. Cheers everyone. Thanks.